Cursor and Cairo are radically different. Now, Cairo starts off with this spec-driven development, where Cursor is a much more vibe, hey, let's vibe code. Yeah, by the way, vibe debugging is hard. Yeah. So what do I, you know, maybe at this moment everybody thinks like, oh, I need to know more about GenAI, because that's what they want. In 5 years from now, it will be something else. Last time I was in South America, and actually most customers, not even in South America, customers would ask me, what should I be doing with blockchain? Nobody asks me that anymore. Yeah? And so now everybody asks me, what should I be doing with GenAI? I'm pretty sure 5 years from now, that won't be the case. That means that as much as the effort you start to put into GenAI right now in terms of learning, which you should, because it is the technology that's going to play quite an important role in the coming years, you also should keep your mind open for the sort of the next tech generation. There is something else that comes after this. I remember when the first LLMs came into the market, they were just LLMs. Now we have reasoning LLMs. Can I point to any one of you and actually explain me clearly what the difference is between the two? Which one should you pick? Yeah. Remember, reasoning LLMs are probably an order of magnitude more expensive because they need a ton more tokens than the regular LLMs. And so when we started building Bedrock, the idea was all about how can we have our customers learn, experiment, measure, learn. Now that's sort of the sequence that we hope that our customers will go through. Not just, don't let the media decide your architecture. What's important for you is that you continue to learn. And of course, you give 600 courses for free in skills builders, anywhere. Half of them have nothing to do with AWS. They're just general education. And so continuing to learn is at this moment the best moment. I know many of our customer companies, I see a high level of anxiety. What should we be doing with this? Or a fear of missing out. Yeah, well, oh, we really need to do this without actually going, come on, turn this into a regular tool in your toolbox where you know everything about, you've been educated about it, you've played around with it, that's why we have Bedrock. Yeah. What's the difference between that one that is cost you 15 cents per million tokens versus the one that costs you $15 per million tokens? The only way for you to figure out what the quality result is think about the problem that you would like to solve with this. Amazon has 14 different database types now, I think, something like that. You are all really wickedly smart in picking exactly the right database for the problem that you're trying to solve. Yeah? You need to get to the same point with all these models. Yeah? You need to become experienced in sort of comparing these different models with each other. And then knowing them in your toolbox. And if there's a particular problem that you have in your business that you think generative AI is the right solution for that, then you know which one to pick or which one to experiment with. Yeah? It's still very much an experimental phase and a learning phase. You have to learn. I'm pretty sure that most of you are in this room here today as well, because it's a great day of learning. And so the advice I have is prepare yourself for learning. Play around, get your hands dirty. Become a better developer by just trying things out. And will you then become globally successful? Well, that's up to you. Yeah. Eventually you'll be, just make sure you become the best architect, the best developer, the best whatever. We have at Amazon different levels of engineers. You know, we have regular engineers, we have the principal engineers, we have distinguished engineers. And even in the regular engineers bucket, there are three different levels. There are tons of engineers that don't want to leave that bracket. Not that they're not learning, but they love to go to work every morning and code. Just build stuff. As engineers, we have the most amazing jobs in the world. We can go to work every morning and create something new. There is absolutely no other job in the world that has that. And so, we should be really, really grateful for that. So, going to work, be creative. And that's the most important thing, you know. And so some people at Amazon will forever never want to become a principal engineer. Why? Because then you have to think about bigger architectures and you spend multiple teams and kind of think, no, I just want to code, which is great. Yeah, because I believe those are very valuable contributors. We see them as very valuable contributors, as much as the contributions are of those who become principal engineers or senior principals or distinguished engineers, who then certainly only need to span multiple pieces of the organization. But, you know, whether you're an SDE1 or a distinguished engineer, we all need to keep on learning. Because the stuff that's important right now is very different from the stuff that was important 2 years ago, and will be less important than the technology that we'll see 2 to 3 years from now.
And right now that you were talking about these being successful but making these great local impact locally, it reminded me of the CTO fellows that were they just launched last reInvent? They were, right?
Yeah, they were there. The AWS heroes that may be in the room, probably also met some of them. So over time I've become more and more interested in those organizations and companies that actually solve some of the world's hardest problems. Now, if you think about, by 2050, the UN expects that there's 2 billion more people on the planet. And believe me, they're not going to live in the US and not going to live in Western Europe. They're going to live everywhere. I find the word global south, I don't know. Let's just use the term, but I'm not really comfortable with it. But most of these people will be living south of the equator. And whether that's in Africa, whether that's in South America, whether it is in Southeast Asia. So how do we feed them? How do we make sure there's an economic future for them? How do we make sure there's healthcare? All these kind of things. There's so many big problems. The United Nations calls them sustainability goals. I think there's 19 or something like that of them. How do we change that? How do we have an impact on things that actually really matter for individual people on the ground? So, Amazon has a leadership principle that says with success and scale comes broad responsibility. So we're working with many of these companies. So one thing, when I started thinking about all of these really big problems, I think it would be NGOs, non-profit organizations, that would be solving them. You know what? It turns out that you can have a really good business and at the same time solve these hard problems. Yeah? Let me give a good example. So actually one of the first companies that I did a documentary series like this called Now Go Build. One of the first companies that we did for that was a company in Southeast Asia called Hera. Smallholder farmers in Indonesia do not have an identity. That means they can't come to a bank to get a loan to buy seeds for the crop. You have to go to the loan shark in the village, who charges 40%. Now, so 40% of your crop is gone before you have even planted it. And so here this company comes in, starts giving smallholder farmers an identity, but also measures their plot of land and the yield of that plot of land. That data set is gold, because every bank wants access to the data set, because microloans to these farmers have a 100% repay rate. And you also know sort of what the size of their field is and the crop and things like that. So you know what is a reasonable loan to give to these farmers. But the government wants this data, the United Nations wants this data. And so here there's a company in the middle that's actually trying to do good. Yeah? But actually is making a good buck at the same time. And so these two things are not mutually exclusive. It is not that good companies, there's companies you only are out for the money, but you can actually have a significant serious impact here as well. And maybe one of the first companies I met here, Belcor, the health and beauty company. Belcor, yeah. So for them, they have 1 million people working for them, sort of consultants, I think. But they don't only use them as a sales channel, they actually use them as a channel to educate people. To make sure that women can become independent, that they can have an own income, that they can actually make their own decisions, that they're not dependent on their family. And so there is a bigger picture behind, and of course, they also sell beauty products. Yeah? But they also sell these people, some of them don't really have any education. They teach them how to make TikTok videos. And I go, why? Well, the biggest sales channel, the biggest advertising channel for health and beauty is TikTok. Yeah? And so, not only sort of trying to sell and just think about, okay, fine, we'll send these people their buckets full of stuff that they can sell, but there's a continuous feedback loop. And they have this scholarship program where they bring people to school, and if you really can get school, you can even get a scholarship to go to the US and actually go to university, and things like that. So, and that's actually not the only Peruvian company that I see doing scholarships and educational and things like that. So I really see that larger companies here in Peru, they also have a social responsibility. They also feel they have a social responsibility. And act on it. Yeah, so it's not only so I've seen dozens and dozens of young businesses doing that. Now, there is also, of course, still a whole group of non-profit organizations that try to solve hard problems. Yeah? The problem is, of course, that non-profits are always strapped for cash. And the cash that they have, they prefer that to apply that to do something right. Yeah? An organization like Mercy Corps, which is a significant organization, has 2 IT people. Yeah? You can imagine that there's not that much innovation happening. And so we started this CTO fellowship, where we basically select CTOs or the top technologists from some of these non-profit organizations, and actually train them how to be more efficient, how to take a bigger picture. And it's not just me and my team that's doing this, although we sort of organize this, but it is the solution architects at Amazon that actually spending free time to train these people. And I know that the AWS heroes also just met with them in Seattle. And actually, there's a lot of heroes that would love to work locally with these kind of organizations to help them out. So, I believe that technology has a massive role to play in solving some of the world's hardest problems. And, we need to make sure that we're there, that we're on the ground, that we're investing in that. And as AWS, we really try to do this. And sometimes it's even governments that surprise me. We were recently doing similar to that now in South America. Did that in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, so Nigeria, Rwanda, Kenya. And we were Rwanda, and we were invited to come to one of the government kind of things. And governments have a tendency to be, say, more conservative with technology, a bit more backwards. Yeah. And indeed, the Rwanda government, just like many others, that actually, so as a knee-jerk reaction, said, no, the government can't use cloud computing. But the Department of Health, they raised their middle finger and we'll do it anyway. And they came into a room that's probably half the size of this room. And there's massive screens everywhere with exactly all the data about healthcare in Rwanda. And they set goals, like a pregnant woman should not have more than an hour to walk to a healthcare center. You need to know where the healthcare centers are. You need to know what kind of paths women take normally to actually walk to those kind of healthcare centers. And then you need to make sure that when you start placing new healthcare centers, that they are exactly in those spaces. Data plays an extremely important role in all of this. And they do good. Because, so it's not just the NGOs and it's not just the companies that want to do good. I see more and more governments willing to take a risk and actually start sort of really applying technology to solving some of their biggest problems.
Yeah, and was it last year on your keynote that you mentioned, you talked about, oh no, it was a year before, about AI for good, and I think if as a takeaway we can take this back and then just be very aware of how can I use my skills and all of this knowledge that I now have in technology and think how can I do this for my career and to make my local community or my city or my country even better.
Well, think about, I don't know how good the maps are here outside of Lima. Probably not as good as inside Lima. Yeah? Most of the commercial mapping companies are only interested in those areas that are commercially interesting. Yeah? And I've seen across the world other organizations being way more effective in creating really fine-grained maps. So Grab in Southeast Asia is like iFood and combined with some taxis and things like that. They do all sorts of stuff. But if you look at the commercial map of Jakarta and the areas around Jakarta, it's not that detailed. Why? Because this car that these bigger companies use that need to drive around and take pictures of everything and then map everything out, there's many places where it can't go. But the Grab drivers can. So there's something you can go to, it's called Grab Maps, that gives you an extremely detailed view of exactly where and how locations are. Yeah? Just in the favelas in Sao Paulo, well, try to deliver a package there as an Amazonian. Yeah? There's a house here, 6 stories high, with 20 families in it, and you go to the next door, and the house has the same number. Yeah? So find new problems to existing solutions, how they are. Yeah? And so, yeah, I love, the best example, I think one of the other examples is, there's an organization by the way called the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team that is really focused on some of these problems. But I met them for the first time in the Philippines. Now the Philippines sit in what's called Typhoon Alley. That means that they have typhoons the whole time, they have earthquakes, they have, and if those two are not happening, then well, volcanoes are erupting. It's a very disastrous country in that sense. But the maps are only there for central Manila. Yeah? And so, if there is an earthquake happening, your knowledge of where is the most sturdy building in the environment where I can go to shelter is just not available. There is no detailed maps for the Red Cross. So the communities do this themselves. And the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap group actually organizes this. So in this neighborhood, on this Saturday, we all come together, you all get an app on your phone, and you walk around and you say, well, this house is made out of cardboard, and this one is a stone church, and really map out all the roads, the accessibility, all these kind of information, which is crucial for companies like the Red Cross in terms of disaster. So here's the community together with the humanitarian OpenStreetMap group to actually get this stuff done. All of that runs on AWS, of course. You know, that's why we know about that. But it is important to do these kind of things. And I urge you, I know you all have busy jobs and you're active in the AWS community, but if you see a problem like this, and you can hand over a few of your hours to sort of help out with something like that, I really urge you to do that. Because together, as technologists, we can solve a lot of these really, really hard problems.
Amazing. Then we have time for one more question, which is going to be around skills. But I want to ask the crowd here, who is a student? Can you raise your hand if you're a student? Okay.
I feel sorry for you.
How many of you have 3 years of experience or less? 3 años o menos de experiencia. A ver la mano. Okay. 5 years or less. Okay. 5 años o menos.
20 years or more.
Yeah, less than 10 years y luego voy a hacer más de 10 años. Menos de 10 años. Okay, and then more than 10 years. Okay. That way we can, because
this is absolutely brilliant. Because it means that for everyone, the ones with 10 years plus, you can learn from the students that are in school now stuff that actually you don't know about because it's being taught in school. And you that are still in school, you can get either motivated or demotivated by the people that are 10 years in this job. Yeah? But you probably had a question because
yes. So it's a skills question. I didn't want to assume that everybody was new to tech. Now we learned a little bit more of this audience. But the question is like, what steps can we take to effectively build skills?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, remain curious. Remain curious. I think that's the best tool to have. That will drive you to pick up a book. That will drive you to go beyond just the media. It will drive you to go to lobster.rs or Hacker News or whatever. You know, get yourself enthusiastic. You know, get yourself into a discussion there. Have an opinion. Yeah? Doesn't even need to be a true opinion, but just get yourself in a mindset that you should be able to discuss technology. You know, there's a few things to my job that I never knew were going to be important as a developer, although a little bit I knew it. Interviewing skills. And I don't mean you being interviewed by a journalist, but you talking to a customer